Alright, so I'm going to probe your mind today. We're going to talk about religious instructions for Negroes in the United States. Right? Signs and symbols rule the world, similar to phases and laws. What you're seeing right there is the cross. So religious instructions for Negroes is some literature and it relates to law, government, order, the emblems of authority, instruments of punishment, so on and so forth. So if you look at the word instructions, you can see struct, right? Instruct extends to the word structure. Now when you give out structure, you inform, right? Informants, federal informants, rappers keep getting locked up by the FBI, but when you give structure, you inform and you set order, right? But you do it authoritatively, right? And inside the word authoritative, you can see author. If you add the F, you can see father. And the father is what? The Pope, the Papa, religion. And so inside order, you can see the word rod. Order is kept by statutes, orders, and commandments, right? It's like Leviticus 18:4. Keep my statutes, keep my commandments. Now, one of the first orders and the ruler of all rulers when wickedness came on the earth was a man that they called Nimrod. This was put into the subconscious of your children in the story Looney Tunes. Nimrod was called the mighty hunter, right? You can read in Genesis 10:8 or 9 about Nimrod. He was the mighty hunter, ruler of Babylon, king of all kings. His symbol was an X. He has statues thousands of years old written in stone. His symbol is an X. X is witchcraft. X means to cross out, right? X means to cross out. And so when they divide and they conquered, they came under what you call this emblem. They came under what you call the cross and the crown. You'll see this on churches all throughout the suburbs, even in the ghettos. The cross and the crown. The cross and the crown is monarchy and religion. Now, Pope has the crown. Pope has the staff, has the rod, has a scepter. When you cross something, what you do is you exit out. Like the Coptic cross. You look down the scope before you commit murder. You cross somebody, you mark them, you're looking down the red cross. The Christian Crusades, the pilgrims came under the red cross. When you shoot through a red cross. Alright, so when you have a cross, what you have is someone that's marked, right? Like the cross from Lorraine. Do say alcohol, the spirit, you get the spirit in you, you become a new you. That's why they call alcohol spirits. But this symbol is the symbol for Lorraine. It means to do what? It means to double cross. Lorraine is the hotel where they shot the infamous MLK. They shot him, set him up. They crossed him out. They double crossed him at the Lorraine Hotel. Look it up. So it's not a coincidence. But this murder all starts from what? Religious instructions for Negroes. The rod of Nimrod. Here, understand something. This is so you can cross-reference. Nimrod is strong. The strong one in hunting. When you hunt You do it for prey. You do it to feast. Nimrod, like Elmer Fudd, was the mighty hunter. He was hunting the sons of man. He was hunting what people would call Shem, but the Caucasian pale Shemites. And so his god that he served was a god called Baal. Demon god Baal, and he was also, Nimrod was related to Canaan. These two words, if you can see it, is where you get cannibal. Nimrod was the mighty hunter, and he was also a cannibal. And so of all the rulers that was taken over, Satan got to one man first, which was Nimrod. And so Satan and the devil has a very illustrious history. And so how powerful was he? How significant was it that the first ruler he got to was Nimrod? We cannot fail to see in Nimrod Satan's first attempt to raise up a universal ruler of men. Before him, there was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the Matrix, right? People caught up in the Matrix. You had Alexander and Napoleon, but none was successful. Satan was successful at getting that Nimrod. He was powerful and used to hunt. So anyways, there's a document. It's called Religious Instructions for Negroes. And so we'll take an excerpt from here. I want you to read this and understand it. It says, a consideration, therefore, of the circumstance in which we find our Negro. So our denotes property. And the circumstance in which we find our Negro population is necessary and preparatory step to inquiry we have at hand. And so when they talk about circumstance, what they're talking about is finance. Notice this is in italics. Italics, if you can look at the word, you can see Italy, right? Italy is what? Rome. The Pope, the Father, right? Religion, the Father. But words are italicized because it comes down through Rome. Is language. It's information that's only known to a few. But the question you have to ask yourself is this. Why, when they talk about religion and instructions, do they talk about a slave population or they talk about family government? Think about it. This section is called The Negro in His Childhood. Understand. Read this and listen. It says, if we take the mass of the slave population, properly speaking, we shall find there is little family government. And for this reason, the parents are not qualified, neither are they circumstanced to fulfill perfectly the duties that are assigned upon them. So when they say circumstance, they're talking about finance, right? Like a situation. You know how someone says, I don't have my situation isn't right. That means their finances, that means their money isn't right. Now, I want you to take into account this section, right? Because this section bears the word rod, right? It says, in families, the children are trained up in iniquity. Iniquity is a nice way to say wickedness and evil. And they are taught by their parents to steal, to lie, to deceive, and nor can the rod of corrections induce a confession. All right, so the rod of correction. This is when you were a child. The rod of correction, if you remember, was what we thought was a paddle, right? No, it wasn't a paddle, it was the rod of correction, right? And this is where you get board of corrections. Attorneys have to go through boards of corrections. Prisons are called corrections. Inside board, you can see what? If you take away the B and the A, you can see that word rod again, because this is how they wanted to establish order. They had to direct, right? If we take this word struct, remember, it's like Wheel of Fortune. Consonants, RSTLNE, or excuse me, vowels, AEIOU, they're interchangeable. So if you take away the S, you put the D, use a vowel, it can become an I. You bring this down, You look close, you can see the word direct come out. And that's what you do when you give instructions. You direct. You lead and you direct. You give instructions because you have an end game. You have an objective at hand. You're not teaching people the Bible. You're giving them instructions because you have to follow instructions like a third grader. And so the Board of Corrections is that paddle that they use for discipline, and they used to make it in the 1800s, the 1500s, during the common law days. And you see a scripture. Look this up. Proverbs 22:15. A child is a fool, and he has foolishness in his heart, but the rod will steer him clear. I mean, don't quote me on that, but that's what the scripture reads. Look it up for yourself. But anyways, the Board of Corrections, that was the paddle, right? But it's not really a paddle. It's called the board, right? Board of Corrections. Attorneys have to go to the Board of Corrections. Prisons it's called corrections. And so they use this to do what? To instruct, right? To bring the rod. You spare rods, you spoil children. You spoil children, you spare rods.